This is the Quiet Land podcast, and today I'm speaking with Kamilla, originally from Uzbekistan, who moved to Finland in 2014 after building her career in Denmark.
Let's go.
She holds a master's degree in corporate communication, had an established professional path before relocating, and is now a mother of a young child. And her story examines what it means to rebuild identity and stability while starting over in the Quiet Land.
Kamilla,
Yes.
good morning, or actually I think it's afternoon now. Welcome and thank you for coming. Thank you for coming and thank you for trusting your story with me and also our listeners. So just to orient our listeners, you moved to Finland from Denmark, but originally from Uzbekistan, Denmark to here.
Right.
You have a 4-year-old child. And you also, before coming to Finland, you already were holding a master's in corporate communication there.
Right.
Yes. So for our listeners who don't know you yet, don't know Kamilla yet, tell me, who was Kamilla when she arrived in Finland? What was your expectations for Finland?
Right. Thank you, Jenny, for having me. It's a real treat to start 2026 with you and look back on my parenting, motherhood chapter. I moved in 2014 in June, in the best time, with my job and to join my partner. So I had a job. I was working for Maersk Line. I was in the middle of this, corporate career rat race, and definitely motherhood parenting wasn't on my face because it was starting a new, family, and that's the reason of my relocation. So I was lucky to have a job, and then kind of think, what would I want to do when we feel confident to become parents? So it was an interesting space because Finland was not so responsive to, in terms of my own cultural code,
Yes.
I lived already in Denmark. I knew how Nordics operate. And it seemed a bit more, I was very cautious, engaging with Finns who were friends of my partner.
Yes.
And then I had to start my own volunteer journey to get to know Finnish society, who is who. So I opened a Finnish society to me and built new friends through Global Dignity work, where I did events to raise Finnish kids' sense of dignity in secondary schools.
Before Kamilla continues, I want to underline something. What she's about to describe isn't about effort or personality. It's about social capital, the invisible layer of access that often determines who moves forward and who starts from the outside. And that layer is rarely discussed openly.
So you're very intentional about building your network here, getting to know people.
Yeah, I think I've learned so much, and I got a few hits in Denmark. I was in my international bubble, but then I understood soon that, social capital is so tightly knit in the communities and networks. So I knew that I also was quite vocal in Denmark on international students, access to job market, diversity, inclusion. So as an activist, I moved here and I wanted to continue and have that sense of consistency in my activist work. And I was having my identity crisis because you had to start over again in a new country with another language. And I learned Danish and I got a Danish citizenship. It was like a real battle of its own, right? And then in Denmark, I knew that in Finland I would have to do it again, and I was prepared.
Yeah.
So that was about also getting that opportunity.
Yeah. Wow. You learned Danish and then came to Finland and you were ready to learn Finnish as well. Amazing there. Now, how long have you been in Finland by the time you had your first child?
It's now 4. I think I was in country, 8 years? Yeah. No, wait, sorry. 8 years, because now it's 12 years.
Yes, 12
I'm in
years.
Finland, yeah.
Yes. And when you became a mother in Finland, what was the first moment you realized you were quite on your own? Because I remember from our conversation, you talked about not having your family around.
Right.
It was just you, your partner,
Yes.
and your baby.
Yes, and it was his parents. He had a father at the time because he doesn't have a big family in Finland. So I myself felt for a long time rootless, but of course my work with diversity inclusion and sense of belonging, I did so much big journey for 20 years to see like, okay, now in the Nordics, like what's my own sense of belonging in this society. So I did my own work and with professional work and with volunteering. So before having a baby, it was a real fear and anxiety because I was an entrepreneur. So the parenting was a big stumble block in my career, and I was like, that was such a strong part of my identity.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand is I didn't want to feel vulnerable because it is financial dependency. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you don't have enough savings, you're like, how are you going to make it? And then I realized that one thing was it was hard for me to conceive a baby. So the whole journey started with fertility treatment. And to those listening, you can do it with a public help here in Finland, or those you can go so private. And I was lucky. It was just about COVID when it hit. I joined, and it was a really long queue. But getting into that clinic, it was already a lonely journey because it's your problem, and you're there by yourself. And it was a very emotional experience because the whole word in Finnish, fertility treatment is lapsettomuus. It's like childlessness. It's so brutal.
It is.
And I would tear every time I entered the door in Tilka on Mannerheimintie.
Yes.
Because there's something wrong with me and I'm so like less than. And, and I also grew up in Uzbekistan where your womanhood is completed by becoming a mother. So that really made me vulnerable from different cultural perspectives. Like here, you're becoming a mom, you're going to be off the job market. There, you're so late to become a mom, but still now you're married, so you're confirmed by a man, So it was really all these narratives that were battling my mind on par when I did the fertility treatment. But I got a great support there. It worked out. And then the whole journey started when I became pregnant. And I tell you, it's the most divine moment of my life. Just the whole process, because I speak 4 languages, so I could get pregnancy, did meditation in Russian, in English, in Danish if I needed. I found podcasts in Danish about, Beyond Babies podcast, and you have all the other stuff, motherhood, parenting. So it really helped me to kind of keep my outlook, say, listen, there's so much insights out there, and I'm not alone. And a lot of apps like Cleo.
Yeah.
Cleo. Yeah. So the loneliness hit when, I gave birth, that it just, you don't talk so much to neighbors, even though you've been there for 7 years. But I had
Sounds familiar in Finland.
Yeah. And so I felt that, I need to be busy creating my own support networks and communities. So I was working at Hanken School of Economics at the time, and I got help from my ex-colleagues, said, listen, if you need help, you truly call me.
Yeah.
So it was first thing was realizing, you write literally in the Excel sheet, who is your support network, who's going to come and call when shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
So that was nice. So I was quite structured about it. Then I went to Neuvola every month, right, for doing checkups.
Yeah.
Then she's advised me on the Facebook groups where you could also get this peer support. So then I felt also like, this way I can also get, because my own other problem was shaming that I'm so late into this. My other friend peers, they have like teenager kids.
Yes.
And it would be nice to have someone else who's pregnant.
With the same stage.
Same stage.
Yeah.
So, but that Neuvola tip that there is, monthly groups based on your parenting. You can find at least 2,500 groups in Finland for every month of your pregnancy. So that was a savior. So loneliness was more in a way hoping that having exposure to your family, that people would like love your child for you. But I had my father-in-law who unfortunately passed away last year, 2 years ago. So I enjoyed his presence, and some other neighbors became very close, so I could just ask them to go for a walk with Amina.
So you were quite active about it, like, creating that network around you, network of support then.
Yes.
And even like creating the Excel sheet, having names there actually. But that's actually quite practical, and you better probably do it before you get the child, when you actually have the time.
And you have the name on it, you have the word on it, right?
Yes.
If they say it and you say, I am going to call you.
Yeah, and maybe save it on your phone readily.
Yes.
Already.
Just like you look for a name for your baby.
Oh, exactly. Now, listening to this, there's, you talked about the Facebook groups, you talked about, father-in-law. a friend who's ready to help you. These are all like outside of the kind of like from the system. This,
Yes.
It's not that the system is providing, the city is providing these for you. These are just people being generous. What do you think it says about the system then in Finland?
Yeah.
Is that if you're not active like you were, contacting these Facebook groups and having that Excel sheet or having a wonderful father-in-law, where would that leave those mothers and fathers?
I'm thinking, exactly from where we stand, we all come from specific privileges and, a capacity to ask and search for questions. Some people don't even want to be in touch with the public system, and they will just go through the language, the original language. I have friends who only have Russian-speaking groups or they have German-speaking groups, and they get the information from that resource.
Yeah.
And maybe I was lucky to have a nice neuvola, the hoitaja, the nurse who was quite informative, but I also know some people weren't.
Yeah.
And, starting saying, you should learn Danish, Finnish. And I was learning Finnish at the time. So I believe I was just in that lucky circumstance that I had already spoke some Finnish. And that gave me that kind of privilege or advantage. I find a lot of resources are still in English. In Finnish.
In Finnish, yeah.
I personally use this digital media called wow.fi.
Yeah.
And it's... What is it? It has 70,000 visitors a week, and they give out a free book, Waiting for a Baby, in drugstores and also in nurseries. But that because was my intention to learn Finnish while I was pregnant. I was like, okay, it's COVID, I'm not able to travel, so I'm going to learn Finnish, I'm going to find these networks, and I'm going to talk Finnish to neuvola and at the nurse, even if I have to Google Translate.
Yeah, yeah.
It is quite a challenge to give yourself if you're already having that, pressure and carrying a child. I do find it's sad if it's not enough left to other foreigners, immigrants, to fix this issue. But luckily, there's other sources right now. There's Mothers in Business who allow to bring kids to events and, don't put your career on such a, hiatus.
Yes.
And then you have these pop-ups in libraries that you can also bring in. And then you have, what is there? Neighborhood mothers.
Yes, different organizations.
All different organizations that actually do cater to international, non-native Finnish moms. And Compass Psychology, they offer peer support groups for young mothers. And luckily there is stuff going on, but you need to be searching for that information because, we're in this attention economy. It's not always easy to find.
No.
And then spouse groups from city-driven spouse programs, right? So from there you can also find opportunities to engage with other moms and parents. But I do acknowledge that if you're a totally new-baked mom, you don't have such a strong network, it will make you feel so lonely and isolated, and that's just not fair. When we need kids in this country, we do get a baby package, which is what, €170 worth.
Yes.
But is that the only things you get? Of course you get the whole benefits, but I think growing a child in Finland and building a family, it should be equally fair and inclusive as in any other Finnish family, because after all, we're all paying taxes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 10% of population, yes, so what? It should be still accessible by design.
Let's go.
Would you say it's easy to find those information? Like these different organizations that existed, that there is help, but is it really accessible to everybody?
I don't think it's accessible if we come out of the capital region.
Yeah.
We have big cities who are leading on this. We can be quite parent happy in Tampere, in Vaasa, in Oulu. But I think if you live somewhere in Kuusamo, my goodness, shops close, cafes close at 5. So where do you go meet people? Who does bring people together? And that too, having that interest, genuine interest to ask, hey, do you have all the resources you need? I think it's the problem of Finnish approach is that it is maybe inclusive by design, but human level, nobody's going to ask you because they consider it intruding in your space.
That's the thing.
So you need to be yourself very proactive and like inquiring yourself, hey, where do I get information? Almost like an annoying inquiring person.
You need to be very curious and wanting to know. Yeah.
Yes, and that really also it always depends on your own agency. And I think you cannot, in Finland, you cannot outsource agency to the weakest groups, the vulnerable groups. Somehow it's also nice to ask, hey, mitä kuuluu? What do you need right now?
Yeah.
Do you have all you need?
Yeah. That's why I try to say also to friends and family that if you know somebody new in the country, new in the city, a new mom or something, just ask, how are you? Can I help you anyway? Do you have, like you said, do you have all the information you need?
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just really that you don't know what you don't know.
For sure, and we're all struggling our own battles, and we don't know like how much information you want to kind of keep imposing on someone. But I think we, playgrounds. I put it as a toolkit, as a way to meet people. I met I met so many people in the playground in my neighborhood, because I moved recently, like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And there was another move, right? Like I moved to from a place where I lived for 10 years.
Yeah.
And like, oh no, how am I going to find new friends? So playgrounds and daycare.
Yeah.
So for sure, this is demands a lot from a mom or parent to go out and start talking to busy parents, even in daycare groups. And I've been also intentional about it because I know that, my daughter is going to be there for another 4 years. So why not?
Yeah.
And it's been working out well. We have 3 parents, families get together, and then my neighbors. We have 4 neighbors in my neighborhood where we can go in and have play dates. So I'm like, this feels like my community.
Exactly.
So
that's really nice. Now, talking about daycare, you've spoken about feeling anxious before talking to a daycare. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Why did you feel anxious?
Yes. So opening up a context, I work in diversity inclusion field. I host events, so I'm always around people in event industry, and I try to create inclusive workplaces and help cities with that work. But when you're your mother and then the war starts, Russia started war in Ukraine, you speak Russian, and it creates such a tension in any public space that I'm around, in the bus, in the school, in the daycare. And I know that it was my choice to speak Russian to my daughter.
Yes.
And one of the parents, she asked me, is it Russian that you speak? And it was somehow like a challenge question, like how dare you?
Yeah.
With that attitude.
Yeah.
And I know I've been still young mother. I probably, Amina was 1 year old, and I could have been hormonally charged, but it really hurt me because that same experience then continued in the bus.
Yeah.
In my neighborhood, somebody just said like, wow, you're speaking Russian. Like such a crime. And it makes me anxious because if I start saying like, because it's my profession to call out on such things, and now in this space where I'm a minority, my child goes to quite white school. How does that affect my relationship with the parents, with the pedagogues? But I did announce that, and I do announce that proactively to pedagogues and say, I want my child to grow up in a multicultural environment, and I want her language needs to be supported, and that I am anxious that she will be bullied.
Yeah.
And because another friend experienced her child, it was outside Tampere, that her child was bullied by a 3-year-old saying that in Finland you speak Finnish. A 3-year-old saying to another 3-year-old.
Oh dear.
So nobody is born racist.
No.
So we have to, as parents, not just as professionals, to really think like, how am I safe around people? How am my child safe around other people?
Yeah.
And to expose our children to diverse environments.
Absolutely. And we need to have the pedagogues, the educators in this.
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the pragmatic things that's been done around it is that there is anti-racism education for early childhood educators, just like as any different like school level in Finland. And there is a book which is now in Finnish and Swedish. In Swedish, it's Skapa plats, create space. So it is about how do you create space for kids who are so different, and we are finding ourselves in Finland in neighborhoods where 41% of kids speak another language than Finnish and Swedish. That's my previous neighborhood in Rastila.
Yeah.
And same thing in Vantaa municipality. It's rapidly diversified, and we
Absolutely.
can't just ignore that's not happening.
No, and I think a lot of the times when I talk to parents or even educators, I don't know whether it's people, maybe some just generally don't know or don't realize, even educators, that you actually have to start it very young, educating children about that, hey, we're all equal. Yeah, no matter where we come from, whatever language we speak, all equal there.
And I think that's why when, working with the dignity workshops, I've seen how kids, they get so personally, emotionally moved by these discussions on dignity, that we're all born equal, we're all each are absolutely valuable, and how their dignity's been violated. And I had parents crying on me that my child was, was discriminated in a school and she couldn't do anything, and it becomes so individualized rather than it should be seen as a structural issue.
Absolutely.
So I think there's been, of course, in diversity inclusion space, we had we've been against the wind for a few years now, plus economics, plus the narratives and rhetoric. But I believe that we cannot ignore the good things that are happening out there.
It just reminds me we need to be very intentional about inclusion.
Yeah.
Also, in all levels.
Right. What I forgot to mention is parental involvement in child education is something that is appearing more and more. And it hasn't been so much discussed. As a friend of mine, Silvia Pereira, she's in a Finnish umbrella organization called Vanhempainliitto, Parental Union. So she's been advocating that how much are parents involved in the Finnish education system. And there hasn't been a lot of research done on this topic.
No.
So how could we bring in the parents as well, not to just, outsource the kids to teachers, but how are then parents also be able to follow and support the child needs? And you have to trust the psychological safety. So I think that's something as well to also question your own role as a parent, that, just don't go by this brand like, Finnish education is the best, and then you're busy with your career or whatever. Yeah. Figure out, how are you supporting it? Are you able to affect the structure? There are some schools that don't have a parental association, because every daycare has a parental association.
Or if there is a parental association, I think quite often they are like organizing this myyäiset or something to have an event for the kids, collecting money for something. Yeah. Not so much of discussion about, how's it going at the daycares with the children. It's not really always increasing the communication between the parents.
No, that's why I'm trying to break that ice, saying that I know that we can go to both extremes, that, leave the parental WhatsApp in peace. It's maybe too much information. But then on the other extreme, you could be like, people in America, they move to certain neighborhoods to network with the parents. I'm not saying that you need to be that intentional, that level, but I think you still want to make sure that you spend so much time together and you meet them anyway. So why don't you build better also ties? Because we as immigrant parents, that becomes your people who your kids will grow up with.
Yeah.
So making new friends is not just, very transactional. It's really also for the, well-being of your life and knowing where your kids will be when they grow up.
To have that balanced person growing up.
So maybe asking much more brave questions in your WhatsApp group. So should we do something?
Yeah. So what do you think would help children and their parents to feel more included and belonging in the early childhood settings? What do you think we could do differently?
To be included, I think, first of all, is to be aware what are your stakes and what are you stepping into. Every country has its own daycare system. Is it private? Is it public? And you would need to know where what are your rights as a parent? What are the kids exposed to? What is sort of, what's the norm? And then if there is something that's happening, which is where your kid becomes outside the norm, you need to question.
Yeah.
You need to be so brave and say, how's my child treated in this?
Yeah.
Like I said, if I want the child to be aware of multicultural background, how is her development supported in that sense? So that she doesn't come one day and say, I don't want to speak Russian anymore. I'll just speak Swedish, So, and then start having conversations with other parents, because you can't do the guesswork yourself.
No.
It always helps when you do put few heads together.
Yeah.
And then also join these parental associations or volunteer where you can, because these different work-life podcasts, there is this, like, again, Mother in Business, Comp Psychology. You get a lot more in English or that language that allows you to understand, what am I able to demand?
Yeah.
One thing was happened to me, that we had this integration discussion in a Finnish democracy festival, Suomi Arena, and we were discussing access for mental health care for immigrants. And it dawned on me, I never thought I could demand that. Of course, it's my choice to move to a new country and then go through this cultural shock. And it's this very neoliberal thinking. Creating your own happiness. But there are things you can demand from your host community that, listen, we have this system, we have these frameworks, and it helps.
Yeah.
So why don't you just have this available, right? In a way that is easy to access. So I think cities could communicate better to citizens. Espoo City does it well, as an example. Then you have the NGO support. So NGOs like Kamilla, they're doing excellent work for multicultural families. You have associations like Mixed Finns. So Mixed Finns, they publish books, they have peer support groups, and they allow for parents to grow their, like awareness, like, is this okay? Is this not okay? Like, what is racism? What is prejudice? What is... these different, what is microaggressions? I think it's a lot of vocabulary that you may not know.
Yeah. And just understanding those vocabulary.
Yes. Sometimes when you move to countries, one of my friends quoted someone, I can't remember, she says, when you move countries, this lady said, I wasn't black, I became black person. That you kind of... Meaning that you didn't have that disadvantage. And then you move countries and then you lose your privilege.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So understanding your privileges at any point in time allows you to be more aware of, like, okay, what are my needs and what are my demands?
Yeah.
And to be able to be constructive, and adequate with, like, okay, I can't demand everything from one school, but I know that if I have that privilege, I have my voice. And it's my opportunity to ask the questions, like, why is this happening?
Yeah, it's really also starting from yourself then.
Yes.
Starting from yourself, like understanding
where
you come from, like you're talking about the privileges, but also then what is that we need for myself or my family?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think parenting makes us real good human beings and more wholesome human beings. It connects us to communities which we didn't know we have.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to know that you can't just run it on autopilot. I think intentional parenting makes you also feel that you're doing a good job, One thing I also learned is so much shame around I'm not doing enough and comparing. I feel that's also removes a lot of joy as being a parent and also an immigrant here, because it becomes a lot of, comparison, and that doesn't help us either. Yeah. So I feel parenting makes us good, but it's always knowing intentionally what makes you a good parent. You can be the best parent you can be.
I have this surprise question for you, a question that I've asked all of my podcast guests here. So if you look back, what's the one belief about motherhood or work that you have quietly let go of over the years? can be about motherhood or
Yeah. What's one
work.
belief?
One belief.
Ah.
Something might be a myth that you thought, hey, I'm going to follow this, but then you figure it out, oh, probably not working.
I think the one belief that helped me is that of course at one side you're vulnerable, but then being a parent, like I said, every parenting makes us better humans and wholesome people with so much more compassion to other humans. I find that it's not vulnerability, but it's the strengths to connect to half of the population. I love women. I love fellow moms.
Yeah.
And I will never hold a grudge.
Yes.
In the same way that I would do before I became a mom.
Yeah.
Knowing that our brain are wired differently. We, supporting the child, pick up the kid, hobbies, I don't know, like cleaning, all this, life kicks in beyond the office and Instagrams, right?
Yeah.
So definitely not thinking this simply, vulnerability, but always remember that it's bigger strengths than even if you're still working on your support network.
Absolutely.
So I hope to anyone listening that if you're becoming a parent, if you already have kids, there are networks and communities ready to help you.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. As long as you just get to one community, it's already a great step.
Yeah. So get out there,
Yes.
find your tribe. It is there and they're ready to help you.
Exactly. And it takes a village to help a woman.
Definitely.
That's my conviction.
Yes. Kamilla, thank you so much for joining me today. And it's been a pleasure having you. And thank you for sharing your story also and your experience as a parent. And I think we've had a lot of good advice from you as to what you can as a parent to do to help you a little bit, in this whole journey of parenthood.
Thank you so much, Jen. It was absolute pleasure to be here, and I look forward to listening to all the episodes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe if I forgot to mention the statistics, if you want to put it in.
Yeah, you can.
Is that okay?
Yeah, you can, please.
Yeah, so I think it refers to question on anxiety.
Yes.
In the beginning when, before planning a baby, the anxiety was about, will I have enough jobs and will I be able to come back to job market as entrepreneur or will LinkedIn forget me? And statistics like from European migration networks say that immigrant women are twice as much unemployed as Finnish women. And, this financial stability takes up from 10 to 15 years to reach on par with women who grew up in Finland.
That's very long.
So knowing these structural challenges, of course, sticks into you because now I know this is in a professional space.
Yeah.
So maybe sometimes not good to know it. The less you know, the more you live in the pink world. But I think it wasn't that easy to overcome. But I think listening to some great, work-life commentators. There's a lady called Liisa Husu from Työelämä podcast Lahtijat, the Leavers.
Yes,
so she says, your career won't suffer if you take off 5 years of your, of the job market because we're going to work until 70.
True.
So when she said that, I was like, for real.
Yeah.
We're fine. So I feel the knowing and the role models, how we kind of shape our perspective on parenting just helps a whole lot to go through these early anxiety thoughts.
Definitely. And I think that's very similar to what one of our guests was saying yesterday. I think about she was in the middle of she felt she had to choose between career or her being home with her kids.
Yeah.
And she really wanted to spend time and be present with the kids. And she figured out actually that, okay, if I take a break from my career, or not even a break, but maybe I'll change the career path. I'll take another career path, May not be my first choice or the one I imagined for myself when I first started, but it can work because, I can still pick up on my dream job later on once my kids are a little bit older. But my kids' childhood won't wait. They
Yes.
always grow.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you can go always back to your career and build it. Just like you were saying,
Right.
Your job won't disappear in 5 years. It still will be there. And you still have that another 30, 40 years to build your career there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's different ways to look at what you want to, as an employer, do for people who are in these transitions, right?
Yeah.
You can, make something with linguistic inclusion.
Yes.
You can enable these workshops where they still can visit companies because it is still employer branding and we need to get the best.
Yeah.
And we know women who get kids, they're much more productive, efficient, which is so against all the biases. So we should remove these biases and discrimination towards women who are home with kids. This is absolute outdated way to look at in a very paradoxical way when we're talking about Finland, right?
Yeah.
So for sure there's a lot of things to be discussed and I would welcome a lot more discussion like this and that's why I'm so happy to be on this podcast.
If professional mobility depends on networks built years before someone arrives, then equal opportunity begins at very different starting lines. And if someone begins several steps behind, can we still call the race neutral? In the next episode of The Quiet Land, we meet Kimberly from the United States, who returned to Finland with a master's degree, an international career in education, and a deep personal connection to the country. Her story explores what happens when expectations of equality meet lived reality, and what it costs to speak up when you don't quite fit the mold, and how privilege doesn't automatically open doors in the quiet land. Come join us next week.